Our top story today dives into concerns that Nigeria's inflation rate could soar past 34% this April, actually 34.98%. But that's not all. The Naira is also feeling the heat, weakening against the US dollar as liquidity dries up. To unpack these critical economic issues, I'm joined by Kazeem Bello, the CEO, Afrique Capital and Equity Funds Limited. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah, good morning.
All right, Cordros has projected that inflation will hit 34.98% in April. Does that in any way align with your projection?
Well, thank you for having me. The central bank is doing the right thing. We have actually, global financial analysts have actually advised the central bank before now to conduct empirical analysis before they bring out any policy, so that you know precisely, you can predict the outcome of your policies. But up to now, we've not seen the central bank conduct those important empirical research into what they are doing. So when I heard that the central bank may have, through its internal process, projected that inflation is going to be 34%, it's a welcome development, but I also want to believe that Mr. Cardoso is trying to kind of gauge the market expectations. It is a good thing. I mean, there's nothing wrong in a regulatory body trying to prospect and project market in terms of predictability. We don't know if it's going to be 34.9% like he projected, but we know for a fact that we are going to be stuck with a spiking inflation for a little while, a longer while, as long as we can sustain the reforms that the central bank is carrying out. You see, what happened is that for an economy like Nigeria, there's a lag time between when you institute a policy and the time when the policy begin to manifest or germane in the economic system that you expect it to be. So a lot has been done by the central bank in recent times. Reforms in the foreign exchange, reforms in the liquidity market, reform in the money market, and then we're expecting that the fiscal policy aspect of it will be carried out by the federal government, so that they can support the federal government in controlling the liquidity in the market. And then that way, the CBN can be able to project inflation and be able to determine what to do, maybe in the next MPC meeting or whatever meetings they may be holding in order to project the economic situation. So I don't think 34% is really a bad number. It's
34.98, that's almost 35.
You said it's 39.4.
I said 34.98.
That's about 35%. The global projection in New York market, where I come from, is that we are going to be seeing about 37, 38% by end of April, going into May. But if the projection by the CBN says it's 35, I guess it's a welcome development. It means that whatever the central bank is putting in place is working for them and is working for the economy. But again, the central point here is that the central bank also recognizes that we got to be dealing with this inflation, spiking inflation for a period of time before we start seeing the respite and when it will begin to decline from the weight of the policy being put in place.
Well, talking about this, this was something that was brought to bear, or that was brought to the fore by Cordros Capital analysts. They were the ones who actually made this projection. Well, moving away from that, we see some of the base effects that are responsible for what we're seeing in Nigeria's inflation figures. Talk about exchange rate pass-through, talk about food inflation, and some other things, really. So looking at exchange rate pass-through and the challenges impeding food supply, these two stand out as factors affecting inflation in the country. And, and just when we thought we were bringing some stability to the foreign exchange market, we saw what you might want to call a relapse of some sort. And then, but we'll come to that later. Let's focus on the factors affecting, food production in the country. What do you make of this? Do you think enough is being done to address this? Because this will definitely have a ripple effect in bringing down the numbers.
Well, there's absolutely no doubt that we arrive at this inflation problem in Nigeria not by sudden occurrence of anything. It was the cumulative effect of wrong choices in policy implementation. If President Tinubu had not decided to reform the foreign exchange market and drop fuel subsidy and the rest of them, we would still have been saddled with inflationary pressure. There's no doubt about that. We will not escape it. But those changes that the federal government is carrying out is extremely necessary. We need to reform the system to allow market-based dynamism to foster our economy. And going back to the question you raised, yeah, I mean, it's, if you look at the dynamics of what is driving the inflation effectively, again, a lot of it has to do with wrong choices. But a lot of us are crying about food security, food inflation. And yes, the main driving force is the food inflation, which is already spiking at about 40% or a little bit above 40% right now. But we know what caused the food inflation. Number one, the 2022 flood actually was extremely devastating. It actually led to a lot of shortages, coupled with the fact that there's insecurity in most of the food basket region in Nigeria. The terrorists and the bandits has driven farmers from their farms, and this has affected cost of food because there are not enough food to be produced. And again, you have to deal with the issue of energy costs that also affect transportation of food from the hinterland to the mainland, where you can actually determine their prices. But again, I want to believe from my perspective that it is a good thing for Nigeria because either to now, we actually have a very destructive pricing system for our agricultural product. We need to be very factual with ourselves. I mean, a lot of those foods do not have a shelf capacity to be able to determine the prices that is what in the market. You bring out a tomato, and then if you don't bring it to the marketplace in the next 24, 48 hours, it perished, and the farmer loses. But if you are able to have a storage facility for it and be able to predetermine and speculate on the prices, the farmer might be able to earn more. I mean, this might be a wake-up time, a wake-up call for Nigeria to invest in those infrastructure so that moving forward, we can practically price our agricultural product, and then based on what we have, the population can be able to purchase at the right price and without having to expel inflationary pressure in the pricing itself and the supply chain. The inflation was caused by supply and demand dynamics. There's a real big shift, declining supply in the face of rising demand, and people must eat, and that is a very huge portion. The next to it is, of course, the price level system that is defective by the exchange rate that we have, and of course, the fiscal spending by government. The last government in the last 18 months spent close to about $13 trillion in the economy that was not necessary, and that itself created a lot of pressure on the liquidity. So those are the things that essentially are causing the pressure on the inflation. And again, it's going to be trending for a little while, and then based on the optics of the policies that is being put in place, we will be beginning to see a decline in the inflation. I really don't know. The CBN projection is that by the end of the year, we should be looking at 22%. I hope we can be able to get that. That also is a factor of other factors can play into that, because we cannot just sit down and say it's going to be 22%. We have to also work towards that by implementing the right policies.
Let me just put it straight to you. Do you believe we can actually achieve that 21 point, maybe 4.7 thereabout?
You mean the inflation?
Yes, please.
I didn't get that question right.
Okay, you were talking about CBN's projection, talking about wanting to achieve 21% inflation in the year 2024. So I'm asking you, just put it to you directly, do you think it's something we can achieve? With analysts already talking about another upward movement in inflation figures, talking about those expecting 34.98 in April. Do you think we can still achieve that 21% that the CBN hopes to achieve?
Again, that's what I said earlier on. That's the earlier projection from the CBN. I hope somebody will not try to tickle with the numbers without actually empirical evidence and facts to support those things. But let's assume that everybody is going to pay according to the game. Naturally, personally, I don't see the inflation declining to 22% or 21% as projected by central bank before the end of the year, because we have to also understand that whether we like it or not, the federal government has a budget to run, and there's a lot of money coming out of the federal government now to reflate the economy, to support the businesses, and to support the governors, the state government, to support agriculture, to support health system. So those are funding that is going to still impact on the liquidity system.
Okay, just before we go, Mr. Kazeem Bello, let's talk about the exchange rate. Now, Naira weakened to a one-month low of 1,300 Naira. And, you know, some persons have blamed this on dollar illiquidity. What are your thoughts? Let's just close on that.
Well, you really cannot blame it on anything other than the fact that the attempt we are doing now is to figure out how to balance the market operational dynamics. It is what I would call an experimental stage for us to actually, to me in person, do the right thing that is acceptable globally when it comes to foreign exchange management. What we have been done either to now has been administrative fiat operation. And behind that, we have also seen a lot of what I would call illicit practices behind the foreign exchange, things that we not expected to do. The only thing that drove foreign investors, especially portfolio investors from Nigeria, wasn't because the Nigerian economy wasn't buoyant. It was because a lot of them cannot understand how we can be managing the foreign exchange market the way it was managed in the past. So now that we are trying to bring sanity into that market, the market itself will have to form an equilibrium. And the process of forming an equilibrium doesn't just happen that way, because you are allowing the market forces to dictate the pace of the market exchange rate. So the rate is going to be going down and up until it finds a balance, and then we can then scale up with that.
All right, thank you so much, Kazeem Bello. I hope that balance comes in as quick as possible. Thank you once again for your thoughts on the show today.
Thank you.